Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about acceleration. Of course, I'll bring the experience of Startup Bootcamp. Startup Bootcamp is now, as you can see, opening up operations also in Italy. I am the managing director of Startup Bootcamp Rome. I'll just spend a few remarks afterwards concerning this. Let me, does this work? No? Thank you. So yes, the basic concept we're trying to achieve is to accelerate a little bit Rome. Maybe this can also trickle a little bit down here in Naples. Why do I say accelerate Rome in Italy? Because personally, I'm Italian, and I strongly believe that the Startup Bootcamp model is a model that, if introduced, can provide a lot of benefits to the Italian ecosystem. And I'll try to explain why, okay? Great, so what are we talking when we're talking about startup acceleration? Okay, when we're talking about startup acceleration, first Alberto and Marco gave a pretty good outlook, but we're talking about startups at a very, very early stage, okay? We don't give a damn about business models, or let me say, not about business models, rather about business plans. We're really focused in basically 4 things, okay? First and foremost, we're looking for teams. And it's not just because of acqui-hire, it's just because we believe that a good team can start with a very bad idea, but if it's a good team, it's going to change it, transform it. If it adopts a lean model, it's going to make it into a good idea. Vice versa, if you start with a very brilliant idea, but you have a very bad team, you're going nowhere. Okay, so this is the first thing we're looking into. The second thing we look normally is market. What's the market the startup is addressing? Because again, you can have a bad idea, but if you're operating in a small market, in a market that doesn't give enough scope in terms of scaling, that's not bringing you anywhere either. So market size, and the possibility of disrupting typically the market is very important. The third thing, of course, is the product. Then yes, we're interested to see what you're doing, but we're interested to see it at a very, very early stage. Typically a prototype, an alpha, maybe a beta, okay? And last but not least, business traction. Whatever you're coming up to, whatever you're trying to propose us, what we're interested is to see that you are managing to perform something. Even, small objectives, but you have to prove that, your small objectives have been achieved. Whether it's business goals or whether it's just development goals. You have to prove that you're capable of delivering, okay? So this is what typically a startup accelerator is looking for. But in order to succeed, what really matters is how fast you can expand, okay? So this is all bunch of services typically that you will be looking for in an acceleration service. In fact, you'll find them also in incubators, okay? You'll get some little funding. We call it pizza money. It's not money with which you're going to build your business. It's money that helps you to relocate. It helps you to pay up a little bit of expenses in the development. It's not much. We offer 15,000 euro. Some other accelerators offer even less, okay? You're getting a lot of education, of course. You're going to get some education. Someone is going to explain you what lean startup means, what business modeling means, what team building means, okay? You're going to get some coaching, some experienced entrepreneur which is going to follow you up in the process. You're going to get support in terms of facilities, logistics. You need a notary, you need an accountant. You're going to get advice, which means people with strong seniority, typically mentors, which are going to provide you in your specific market some help and insight, and especially sponsoring, which means relationships, which is really all that really matters in accelerators. Accelerators is really, in fact, a matter of putting you in contact with the right people. And why this? No, this is not the right presentation. I sent you a new one, but okay, we'll keep up with this anyway. People often ask me, what's the difference between an incubator and an accelerator? And I think this is, something that is recurrent, and I think we might as well stress it a little bit. Incubators are organizations that provide services to startups and generally speaking to entrepreneurs. They're very worthy organizations. It's a very old concept, after all. It was developed basically in the 50s. Accelerators have a single major difference. They invest. They provide the services, they provide the same services that your incubators are providing, but they invest, which means they share in the risk of the entrepreneur. They share in the risk of the founder. And this is the basic difference, okay? If you got an organization which is not investing, it's not an accelerator. And why this? Why is it so important? Because when the accelerator is sharing the risk with you, he is doing everything in order to speed up the process, because time is capital. Time is expense. And so he will do anything to get you out as fast as possible to the next goal. And the next goal for an accelerator is to bring you to investors, to seed investors. So investors who will typically invest in something which ranges between 200 and 600K. This is what happens more or less in Europe. So keep in mind this very important difference, okay? And I don't want to deprecate in any way the role of incubators. Incubators are absolutely fundamental. They're very important, especially in countries which don't have a strong tradition of innovative entrepreneurship. And they don't have players like Google or Facebook or Cisco or Amazon, which can really provide that humus, that breeding ground of talent, of knowledge, of skills. Incubators are very important to promote the culture of innovative entrepreneurship. They're very good at bringing together potential entrepreneurs, strong talent, and so on. But don't get me mistaken. I mean, that's a role that incubators have to play. And honestly, I think in Italy, we should have much, much more incubators than what we have. I know very well the case of Poland. In Poland, since 2009, they've opened 80 incubators, which output an average of 10 startups each a year, which means 800 startups coming out of the incubators, each receiving funding, each receiving services. This is a very good job that the public institutions can provide. But an accelerator is something different. An accelerator is something which is sharing the risk with you. And in fact, you could say that while an incubator's business is to provide services, whether it's paid by the state, whether it's paid by sponsors, whether it's paid by startups, there are some incubators that actually get the startups to pay them to be paid. But whoever is paying, incubators basically have a business, provide services. Accelerators have a completely different business. They have to push you up, and in fact, they'll do everything to strip out any kind of additional services which are not required by the startup to move forward. In a certain sense, is cut the crap and just get the startup going in the right direction so it can go and achieve an investor as quickly as possible. Okay? Please get back to the slide before. Okay, so why Startup Bootcamp? Okay, so this is a very strong claim, okay? The top performing accelerator program in Europe. Now, why can we say this? We can say this because we have the data. The data is public. You can go on the Startup Bootcamp website. There's a section, it's called Stats. And there you get all the data of each single individual investment that has been done on startups which have been accelerated by Startup Bootcamp. There are only 2 acceleration programs in the world that actually do this. One is Startup Bootcamp. The other one is another very important startup accelerator, which is called Techstars, which is based in the US. And now recently has started moving also in the UK. And what do these data say? What they say is, on average, over 70% of the startups which are accelerated by Startup Bootcamp programs manage to go in a subsequent seed stage. We saw how important this is. I think it was Alberto mentioning before that on average it's about 26% the startups that manage to go through an acceleration program and enter into the subsequent stage of funding, the seed stage. Well, so this gives you a comparison. Startup Bootcamp is over 70%. Actually, in the most recent acceleration programs, it's over 80%. And what we mean by 70 or 80% is that the startups that go through manage to achieve this investment within 6 months from when they end the acceleration program. Okay, so these are very clear metrics. Okay, with which acceleration programs then go to their own investors and try to, fundraise and get the money to invest into the startups. Okay. Just to give you an additional idea of what we're talking about, each startup that manages to go into the subsequent phase, the seed stage, on average receives about 400K euro investment, okay? And that has to be compared with what, for example, a Techstars startup gets, which is about twice as much. But of course, they're operating in the US, and this is something to keep in mind. In Europe, on average, at any stage, whether it's seed, whether it's round A, whether it's round B, on average, you get half the amount of capital that a startup gets in the US, okay? This is something to keep very much in mind, because it also explains why it is so hard to get startups going here in Europe, and especially in Italy. Okay. So far, Startup Bootcamp, which has been launched in 2009, has already, now it actually is about 135. There are 135 startups that have been processed, okay? So when we're talking about 135 startups, over 72% of these have gone into a subsequent stage. Okay. So how does it work? Well, Startup Bootcamp is, in fact, a network of acceleration programs that are based in different countries. It all started in Copenhagen in 2009, and then it slowly expanded in other cities. The basic concept of Startup Bootcamp is to create vertical accelerators. What do I mean by vertical? In a certain sense, accelerators normally operate by focusing on a specific territory, like London, and competing with other accelerators to pull the best talent which is available in the city, or which is getting to the city, because it is attracted by the potential of the city. For example, Berlin. Once startups are selected, accelerated, and presented to the investors, startups are potentially, let's say, brought to the broad investor public. Startup Bootcamp, in a certain sense, inverts this process. In a certain sense, we work a lot in qualifying the demand for startups in a specific territory. So we try to leverage the strength in terms of industrial potential, industrial relations, and especially in terms of potential acquisitions and exits of a specific territory. So for example, Copenhagen is focused on mobility. Cell phones, cell apps, and mobile apps, and so on. Why this? Because, of course, the Scandinavian world is very strong on that. And because of this, Startup Bootcamp Copenhagen is also receiving a huge load of support by the Danish government. Amsterdam is basically focused on web, digital, NFC, and contactless. Dublin is focused on health because most of the American pharmaceutical multinationals have their EMEA operations based there. Eindhoven, high-tech, because there is Philips, one of the major sponsors. Berlin, transportation, because it has as sponsors Mercedes and Bosch. Haifa is the only one which is not vertical, but that's for very specific reasons that have to deal with Israel. And, as you can see, Rome, which is coming up, and which will be focused on made in Italy. Or basically, actually, food, lifestyle, culture, tourism, travel. There are another couple of operations which have been set up recently. This is an old slide, actually. One now in London, which is focused on fintech, which means technology for the financial services, and another one in Istanbul, which is focused more on the Middle East market. Okay? Cool. So what works in Startup Bootcamp? Well, I would say there are three key factors. Number one, vertical focus. As Alberto, I think, was saying before, or Marco, I don't remember, there is overcrowding in the market of startups, a lot of copies out there, and the fact of focusing on vertical sectors is helping a lot. Why this? Because we see that there are entire industries which still have to be, let's say, covered by the disruptive emergency of new technologies. We've seen this in the financial services, we're seeing this in the transportation industry, we're seeing this in the health industries, and we hope to see this also here in Italy with what's typically strong of the Italian industry as well. This also means that we find strong partners, strong investors and sponsors who group together with us to provide the best skills and the best output for startups which decide to participate to our programs. Then, of course, we focus, on highly skilled and experienced teams. It took me about over 1 year to convince these guys to open up in Italy. Highly requiring, very high standards, also in terms of how you get to launch the program. And last but not least, the network. Having so many operations in so many diverse technological hubs helps to bring together investors, funds, and especially corporations, which can be interested in either participating in the program or investing in the startups. Okay. Next one. So how does it work? It's basically a 1-year cycle. So each acceleration program basically lasts 1 year. Most of the work is done during the selection phase, which almost covers half of the period. So during half of the period, we basically look out and select startups that will participate to the acceleration program. And we start from an average of 500 startups, and we cut it down to 10 startups. In doing this, we involve a lot mentors and other professional skills, which help us to select, to understand really the potential of the teams. Okay? The acceleration phase, in fact, lasts only 3 months. Very short. Very short because I told you before, cut the crap. What we're doing is packaging the teams and just shipping them to the investors as quickly as possible. Okay? And it all terminates with a major event where normally we have literally tens of investors from all over the world, which is the Investor Day. Okay, and so how do we operate then there? As I told you, we're not focusing on the local talent, we focus on international talent. So we get normally on average over 70% of the startups which are accelerated by a program come from a country which is different from the one hosting the program. Last year, Berlin, out of 10 startups selected, not one was German. We had Russian, we had Estonian, Argentine, Spain, France, Canada, US, Austria, and Italy. Not one German. So what are we doing? We pull in that vertical the best that there is globally, and we bring it to a location where we can provide the best in terms of business relations and knowledge to develop their specific business. Okay, thank you. And in doing this, we also do a number of events all across the world. And I can say on behalf of Startup Bootcamp, if, for example, in Naples, someone wanted to organize a Startup Bootcamp pitch day, would be very happy to do so. It's an opportunity for the local startups to present themselves to Startup Bootcamp and eventually be selected or oriented to any program. Okay, thanks. So, okay, we can skip this. Just go, go, go. Okay, here. So what's the real challenge that an accelerator has? Well, first of all, let me say one thing. I want to just spend a few words also on what I heard before. Is there a bubble in acceleration? Absolutely yes. So far, there are about over 300 accelerators, or so-called accelerators across the world, but only one has paid its investors. Only one. It's called Y Combinator. It was founded in 2004. It's based in Silicon Valley. The next one coming is called Techstars. It's an American-based acceleration program. It's starting to pay its investors. In Europe, I think Startupbootcamp is on the right way. It already has 3 exits, and it's having the same performance as, let's say, the major American accelerator programs if you compare the size of investment, of course, between US and Europe. But if you look around at the rest, things are going very badly. Acceleration is a very, very tough business. Very tough. Why this? Because the length of the investment to which an investor, which is looking into acceleration, is considering is very long. On average, a VC fund is considering investments that are going to last 3 to 5 years. A seed investor, you have to add another 1.5 years. An acceleration program, you have to add at least other 6 months, which means, on average, an investor in an acceleration program is looking into a period of investment of over 5 years, which is very, very long, considering the risk. So this is very, very tough. And the reason why there are so few accelerators which have so far managed to pay off on their initial investors is all with that. So acceleration is a very tough business. In fact, in order to manage it, we don't rely exclusively on investors. We also try to bring in sponsors. In fact, about 50% of the investment of the funds that are operated by an accelerator fund typically come from a sponsor. And we look for sponsors for 2 reasons. The first, of course, is funding. But the second, as I explained before, is because we look for corporate sponsors that want to engage into the program. We want to look for business-leading companies that want to empower their innovation strategy by having direct insight into what's breeding into the startup communities. And this provides us help in terms of knowledge, in terms of relations, which are the most important of all. Okay, so what are the 3 major challenges which all accelerator programs face? Strong funding, strong value by funding and partners. We just spoke about this. Top facilities, top program, very committed, very extremely committed, and strong partners in the vertical. But in the end, what really works for an acceleration program is that it mixes all this together and it is capable of producing a value for the startups, which is top. I mean, the best accelerator programs are ones that are capable of attracting the best available talent out there. This is why every startup wants to go to Y Combinator. And this is why Y Combinator works. Because every best startup wants to go there. Okay? Okay, you can skip this. Skip this, skip this. Okay. Yeah, I'll finish it here. Okay. Maybe some questions? No questions. Lunchtime. Okay. So, of course, Rome, we're now in the fundraising of the Rome program. We hope to start by this year. It's not easy in Italy, of course, but we're very confident. And of course, we certainly look forward to a lot of startups coming out from Naples, which is only a 1-hour drive by train. Okay? Thank you.